Honest J. Nowak. Oh yeah.
A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to Honest J. Nowak. So today's episode is where I'm going to bring up another big subject out there that has a lot of controversy going on behind it. Especially whenever I talk about it, there's always a problem at hand. Because I'm just simply going to be talking about generations. And it's mostly the type of generation that's associated with the type of time period that you come from, or where you originate from. My birthday was on Friday, June 4, 1999 AD, at around 9:02 a.m. Central Daylight Time. I was born near Milwaukee, and for the most part, I've been living around this same area my whole entire life, though there were a couple of intervals that took place where I ended up having to go to such places, including the county of Waukesha, the small township known as West Bend, and a couple other places along the line. But for the most part, Menominee Falls happens to be where I currently live. And let me tell you, I'm pretty certain that anyone out there who happens to be very familiar with their birthday should at least get to know about the types of generations in human history. Because, for the most part, we might be most familiar with one type of all sorts, called the Baby Boomer era. And the Baby Boomer era spanned from the end of World War II in 1945 all the way up to 1964. Yeah, that was a pretty long time right there. Nearly 20 years would pass before a generation of another type would come through. And it would be known, especially by me, as a generation that's based on the Vietnam War. But of course, it wasn't entirely supposed to be its own generation. Because eventually there would be others out there, including Generation X, Generation Y, and eventually we'll have ourselves a Generation Z, which still has yet to come. Generation X, according to, well, chronological research, happens to show that the majority of people who were born in the 70s, 80s, and 90s happen to be from X. Millennials, or Generation Y, happen to come from within the last couple of decades, and as far as Generation Z will go, well, as soon as we get ourselves into that time period, then, well, we'll have ourselves the news that we're looking for. The facts that we're also going to look for should also come by. But to pretty much talk about generations themselves and the kind of people we have in them, well, for the most part, I, an X, happen to inherit most lifestyles of some of my older brethren, and that of which would be some of the more traditional lifestyles that we typically inherit, like going outside to play instead of, well, relying on electronics or, for the most part, some, well, of those things to keep us entertained. And I do happen to like going outside a lot more than just, well, interacting with video games, but of course, I do spend some time on video gaming as well. Otherwise, there would never be a Gaming with Kaiju Force Neo. Yeah, little cross promo there. But as far as I've known about Generation Y in the last 20 years that have passed, is that, well, for one thing, millennials of all sorts, they happen to dress up in certain clothing. I mean, what's going on with that? Do they just think that it's more aesthetically presentable and that it seems to be more attractive? I mean, there's a lot of questions I pretty much got about the whole thing itself and why people think that, I mean, millennials just have a certain lifestyle that they all have the need to rely on just to get by. But for the most part, I've seen a lot of millennials do some pretty amazing stuff. I mean, they've had the urge to pretty much go out and buy certain expensive items, and we've actually been seeing a lot of millennials do some other stuff lately. Not that it's, well, getting any worse than it probably would, but no matter what the case is that I'd say, no matter what generation you come from, you might as well tell me a little something about yourself and the way that you happen to take on your own birthday in regards to what generation you originate from. I guess anything is possible. So, I mean, that's pretty much all I got left to say about Generations. And wow, nearly 5 minutes have passed, and I could certainly say that there's been a lot of stuff that I will in fact be talking about later on. So if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.